Mike, how you doing?
Good, thanks, Richard. How are you?
Very well, thanks, mate. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 13th episode of the Six Sessions. Lucky number 13, Mike. Each week, I've been lucky enough to chat with someone in the growth space across marketing, sales, and CX. Today's guest is coming from an industry that is close to my heart, and he's going to talk to us about content-driven growth. If you're involved in marketing north of the border, you'll know today's guest, marketer, speaker, and all-round content maker. I've not even had a dram yet, and I'm already slurring. These chats are designed to be short and sweet, but hopefully full of insight. But let's be honest, I'm yet to make any of them short, so you have to forgive me that. But also, you're not paying for it, so you get what you're given. And just a friendly reminder, it's definitely unfiltered, and that's what makes it fun for me. Today's guest started working in social media way back in 2007, which is way back before the algorithms determine the way that we see the world and who wins elections and referendums, but we probably won't get into that. And that's not how I want to end my Friday. A content marketer of the highest order, he's worked agency side, brand side, and even grown two small businesses of his own. But in my humble opinion, he's now reached the pinnacle of his career. He's head of content at Wean Spirits. Not only can I attest to the fact that they produce great whiskey, but they are rapidly expanding globally, and that's driven through content. So today, my first and second loves, whiskey and marketing, are coming together to round off this week perfectly. Joining us all the way from South Queensferry in Scotland, which is actually not too far from Edinburgh, for those of you who don't know the local, and I did have to look it up on Google Maps, I'll be honest. It's my absolute pleasure to close out this week with Mike McGrail. Mike, welcome.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me on. Good, nice intro there. Yeah, good to be here.
It's a pleasure having you come on. We were saying just before we started this, we've been connected for 9 years on Twitter now, and never actually had a real life conversation. So it's nice to, not even meet you in the flesh, but kind of voice chat now, I guess.
It gets meeting new people at the moment, doesn't it?
No. So first question I have to ask, you started playing with social back in 2007, which makes you like proper OG. So which platform did you start with?
So back then I was running with a very good friend of mine, Gav. We were running live music events as a kind of side hustle, as opposed to our 9 to 5s. And we were selling, 80% of the tickets for these gigs through that platform. Now, there was no actual facility to do that, but every time someone came to the door to one of the nights, we said, "How'd you hear about us?" "Oh, MySpace," and that just kind of opened up my mind to it. And I'd graduated from uni with a degree in marketing at that time, but I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do. And then in 2008, I ended up working in a really small digital agency, and my job was SEO and PPC. I mean, the SEO side of things was writing meta descriptions and doing a lot of stuff that you would never get away with now, but that worked an absolute treat before Google really clamped down on the black hat stuff. And then a lot of AdWords stuff. And then I really started to think, well, social media is definitely becoming a thing. I'd seen a bit of success in a small way from it, and started getting clients of the agency to agree to go on to Bebo. So we had a chain of nightclubs across Scotland who I had on Bebo, but that was a bit disastrous because they just started posting really bad photos of people in all sorts of states across the board, which was a bad move. But the first success was I got a chain of chemists up here, like pharmacies, to start creating tutorials on things like how to use hair straighteners that they sold, how to do makeup, and worked really well, and they started loving it. So that was really my first kind of exposure to using social as a real marketing tool. And then Twitter as well. I joined it personally in 2008, and I connected to a lot of people in the States, marketers who were sort of streets ahead in their thinking, and started getting clients on Twitter as well. So yeah, you're kind of right. I was there pretty much at the beginning of it all, and then everything else that's happened since has been pretty crazy journey in the social media world.
So 14 years into social now, which has been your favorite platform? Because there must have been a fair few you've seen come and go. So which is the favorite over that period?
Twitter is more than a social media platform to me, because to be honest, Twitter has allowed me to do a lot of things I've done in my career. I wrote a blog back then called the Social Penguin blog, and we had a big readership coming from across the world. And again, it was just a kind of side project, but that was a big thing on Twitter. And I just increasingly got a strong following there. People started to like looking for my opinions on social media marketing. So it's just been a kind of constant thing that's been with me throughout. And, we first spoke there, and it's really made me have great relationships with marketers and beyond that everywhere. So that's great. And then in more recent years, I guess Instagram's just a real love of mine. I just love the visual aspect of it. I'm just hoping that it doesn't go down this route of just really far too ads driven, which some would say it already is, and just becoming a horrible little, like Facebook's little brother type thing, But yeah, Twitter and Instagram are still big parts. Whereas I barely look at Facebook now, apart from logging into ad accounts. I just can't hack it.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of like business groups that people kind of force me to use Facebook, which I find a pain in the ass, but it's the only thing I use on Facebook anymore. And sometimes Messenger, but only if people contact me. It's never like my go-to channel. And like, conversely, which is your least favorite?
Probably Facebook, to be honest. I've just fallen out of love with it so much.
Yeah.
It all started when you were getting people constantly inviting you to play like Pharma Yard all sort of thing. And then I just find Facebook it seems to be the place where people go to just moan. And that's not cool, especially at the moment. We don't need to be surrounded by negativity. I do have to give a shout out to LinkedIn, actually. I do really, really like LinkedIn. And when I was running my own businesses, in fact, even getting into this role, it's played a key part in my personal success as well. But I can see it going bad as well. And it's just, they never seem to get these things right for long enough, but it's always this need to just make as much money as possible starts really affecting their kind of original missions.
Do you know what? I think marketers are in part to blame for that. Not only are we trying to like push things to get the most kind of return out of them, we take strategies that we learn on Facebook, and then it tries to be mapped across channels like LinkedIn. So ultimately, the channel starts to adapt to the processes that are driving through it, and it all becomes a bit of a mess. I think I can't even count how many platforms have got stories and that kind of crap on it now. So.
Yeah, just rinse and repeat. Snapchat really nailed the stories thing, and then Instagram went, well, we'll have a bit of that because the Facebook, that whole group tried to buy Snapchat, and I think they went, well, if you're not going to sell, we'll just ruin you. And Snapchat's still got a really loyal base and a certain demographic, but you really don't hear that much about it.
So how's 2021 started for you? How's it been so far?
It's been great. We at Weans, we're in a big planning phase for the next financial year. So that involves, budgeting, but also really looking at what we want to achieve this year in terms of our product launches, our campaigns, our marketing, our sales. We are we're an e-commerce business secondary, to be honest. The pandemic changed that to a certain degree, but we have a big sales operation, and a big part of my team's role is to support them as well. So we sell a lot of our products through the on and off trades. So it's not all about digital as such. There's a huge thing in the spirits industry, a term called liquor to lips. So unless we can get our stuff into people's mouths, that sounds a bit brutal to be honest, but unless people try it, they're unlikely to necessarily buy it just off the back of some online interaction. However, we're seeing great success there. So we have to be mindful that it's not just all that kind of business to consumer stuff. So yeah, we've got a lot to cover. We've got a lot of territories to cover. So it's been big planning, but so excited, and we're already starting to put out some nice stuff. So yes, it's been a really solid start.
So like, tell me about Wemyss. So like being brutally honest, until you joined them and I kind of saw the social updates of you joining them and started seeing some of the content, it wasn't a whiskey brand that I'd had much awareness of. And like, I'm not a whiskey aficionado. I like whiskey. I like to have certain whiskeys that I enjoy, but I've never really kind of dug into Wemyss. So like, tell me about Wemyss.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's whiskey and spirits world can it's fair to say is dominated by a number of giant players. And, if you say whiskey to somebody, people might say Johnny Walker, Highland Park, White Mackay, whatever it may be. But then you've got this whole other layer of smaller producers who create great products and try to do things a little bit differently. And certainly Wean Spirits does that. So we've got 3 brands under our belt. We've got Kingsbarns Distillery, which is the bottles you can see here on the top, which was established in 2014 in Fife. So it's a very young distillery, but we're already producing gold medal award-winning whiskies. The start has been phenomenal there. And then there's Wean Spirits, who produce a series of single malt blends, but also single casks. And this is an example of one of them. So we relaunched the core range, and this is one of the ones that you bought last year, and these really stunning decanter style bottles, really bold label. So we're really excited and proud of these, and they're starting to make a mark and really getting noticed on the marketplace. Although they launched during the pandemic, so it's been an interesting journey on that one. And then we've got a gin brand called Darnley's, which is actually, it'll be 11 years old this year. So it was around before the big gin bubble, and it's a fantastic spirit. So they're the 3 key brands in our umbrella. The company's run by Isabella and William Wemyss. It is a family business, and we're a fairly small team, I think it's fair to say, around 30 to 40 full-time employees. But we are global, and we're growing very much in that way. So someone's just joined my team in Singapore as we look to push further into Asia. And I'm actually growing a really great small team at the moment since I joined. So we've got big ambitions, and we're well known in certain circles, but we want to push that further out.
So I've seen videos of you climbing rocks and traversing cliff edges, and I think even getting stuck out on a rock. So all of it with whiskey bottle in hand. What is your actual role at Wemyss?
Yeah, so I should have said that. That was yesterday. I was scouting a location, and it's a very difficult location to find. It's this amazing rock on the coast, and I found it, but then I got stranded by water. And I just want to say, please take things like tides very seriously, people. I wasn't in any real danger. I just might have had to end up getting wet, but I had to end up climbing, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, take these things seriously. I feel like my video maybe hasn't had the best message from that point of view. I'm head of content, which means that across the 3 brands, I very much oversee and drive the content strategy. And then I work with my team of social media marketers and creatives, and also the brand managers of the different brands, and then the sales team, and even the production team, because everything has to be in line. And we all have shared objectives. My team will have things we want to go and do, but ultimately the output is creating visual content, photos, videos, and then we're pushing more into the written word this year. That sounds like we're almost going back the way, but it's not something that the business has regularly done in terms of blog posts and articles, but we really want to push that further. And we've had huge success in 2020 from email marketing. So we're really making sure that we're joined together across a lot of the digital areas. But we do have this thing, like I mentioned earlier, where a lot of our business comes from bricks and mortar. Yep. So we need to work out how to make those 2 things, the digital world and the real tangible world, I suppose, work together. And that's my role. It is strategic, but I also do a lot of production. So I'll be out with crews directing shoots. And then I took some shots myself yesterday while I was getting stuck in the middle of the sea. And it's a brilliant role, to be honest. It's so varied, and I'm really chuffed to be in it. So
how does that process work, right? So like the distillery produces a new, or like you just said, you've just rebranded the core range. So yeah. How does that work? Do they come to you and say, here's what we branded, here's the branding, here's the name, here's the target market. How are you going to get this in front of people? Or are you part of that earlier stage, like that positioning piece before you start to talk about how you put that in front of people?
Yeah, so the new product development, NPD as we call it, tends to start kind of at the core of that, the people that actually make our whiskey. but what we make is informed by the market and the consumer. So we know what we want to make in order to make a product that people want. That being said, if you take King's Barnes, for example, it's very, very young to be putting whiskey out. And that raises a few eyebrows, because there's this complete kind of myth in the whiskey industry that young whiskey can't be good whiskey. And it's not true. It's just absolutely not true. So King's Barnes is in a lovely position where it's kind of a new kid on the block, and we can be a little bit experimental with it. But the thing that will increasingly be happening is that we're very data led, and that's certainly been ramped up in the last year or so. So we are getting a very clear picture now of who our audiences are and who our customers are, who's actually buying our products. Yeah. And that data and that insight will be getting plumbed into these new product development stages at an early stage, for sure. There's also a thing with Wean's malts. So they're blended malts. They're blended single malts. So we don't actually produce the whiskey for those. We take casks from other distilleries and then put those together and mature them in different ways, in different casks, for different lengths of time, to produce a flavour that we're looking to put out on the market. So this one is a Spice King, and that's all about that kind of spicy flavour. Peat Chimney's smoky. We've got the Hive, which is sweeter, sort of lighter, a great introduction to whiskey, to be honest. So we're pushing the flavour aspects of those, and each brand has its own kind of way of speaking, its own dialogue, and each product has its own kind of merits. So yeah, we're driven by what we can make, and then we want to be able to have an input into what potentially should be made based on what we're seeing out there from data.
So how did you personally get into content marketing in the first place?
I feel like I've always really been involved in it, because to me, without content, there's not really marketing as such. So even having been involved in social media for so long, I regard a tweet as a piece of content that can be part of a marketing strategy. Then you've got video, written words, the whole kind of shooting match. I think being a blogger from an early stage as well made me see the value of that. And then it's kind of moved along over the years with me. So social, then blogging, then photography, then video, and it just became an area that I really wanted to zone in on. And then I launched my consultancy in 2012 after a few years in agencies, and I very much decided I'm going down the content marketing route with that consultancy. So yeah, and I just feel like it's a really exciting area to work in. Particularly the visual aspects of it. But yeah, and then something I'm always keen to impress on people is that content has a place right throughout the marketing funnel. So regardless of what funnel you use these days, it's changed so much. It can obviously play a key part in the awareness phase of a marketing funnel. Quite often a video or an Instagram post or something may be the audience's first interaction with your brand, but sometimes the tendency can be just to think that content's done its job at that part. If we popped people in the top of the funnel, then we want to move them through with content. So if you're a B2B brand, a SaaS brand, that's when you start to see things like demos coming in, or comparisons with other products and testimonials and all this stuff. But content should play a key part right through the funnel, regardless if you're a consumer brand, a B2B brand. The lines are so blurred between all that anyway nowadays. And then retention as well. I think content is so vital for retaining customers. We all know that it's far cheaper to retain customers than buy new ones, right? So great content can retain a customer. And particularly if you take whiskey, so our whiskies, they're premium products, so they're not the cheapest of whiskies or gins out there. We might have people that buy from us 2 to 3 times a year. So in those gaps, we need to keep them engaged, and content plays a key part in that. another way to. I used to be marketing director in a tech startup, and I always go back to that for a lot of the kind of experiences that I got there. So that was a high ticket item that we were selling. It was really expensive software, and you buy it once and then that's it. But we used to create a lot of content to make sure that people got the best out of that product, and it became that magical word of sticky, where effectively their businesses can't live without it. So yeah, totally off on a tangent there. I can't remember the original
question. It's perfect, but my main question, so you're talking about like a content funnel, right? So like the attract, convert, delight type stuff.
Yeah.
How does that map over a whiskey brand? Like I get the attraction bit, like like you can immediately go, okay, best top 10 whiskeys, or like the best cheeses to eat with whiskey. Like that content kind of writes itself. But how do you then, like, what's the content that fits in those lower parts of the funnel for a whiskey brand?
Yeah, that is a really great question, and one that we're working quite hard on just now. And we definitely live more in the higher parts of the funnel. A lot of that decision-making part will come down to our remarketing activity. So we know what products people have been looking at, and we start to work that through Facebook and Instagram. But a key aim of ours is always to get people into our email funnel. And that's where we can start to get really smart. And when people are opening emails and reading content about the Spice King, or watching some of our videos and whatever it may be, spending a lot of time on those pages, then we'll start to really push them towards that purchase. Now, we don't discount. It's just not a thing we do. However, we do have some incentives for signing up for the email list. In the first place, you get free postage and things like that. So that bottom part, that decision thing, because albeit we're not the cheapest of whiskies or gins out there, it's not the same as making the decision to take a big subscription to a piece of software, or make a big purchase. So it's really just giving people the big insight into what this whiskey is all about. But we're finding increasingly effective is bringing people to the front of it, the process, the people that are behind it. And the consumer at that point starts to get really bought into beyond the bottle, beyond what's in the bottle. And they think, you know what, I want to be a part of that kind of journey. And that's kind of what we're working towards. But I think I do feel like, even though content does live throughout every funnel, I think that the higher up in the funnel with the brands like ours, the more success you're going to see.
So you've done agency, brand side, you've run your own small businesses. Which role did you learn the most in? Like this is one of those things. Like when I look back at my career, like, not that I'm that old, saying like kind of looking back, but like when I look back at like the stuff I've done, I've got like key parts where I'm like, shit, I really learned a lot in that role, or like even I've moved on from that role because I wasn't learning anymore. Like you've done the kind of the marketing mix in terms of like the types of businesses you are part of. Where do you reckon you've learned the most?
Wow, yeah, I mean, I'm always learning. I think we all are. I ran two businesses and had clients, both service businesses, had clients on the scale of, Skyscanner, big spirits brands, down to local kind of startups. And the biggest thing I learned through all that was how to really tune into what different businesses of different sizes at different stages need. And a huge amount of that comes down to actually listening, but really trying to live their business for a while. So I was always keen to spend some time actually working in a business, or spending as much time across departments as I could. So I think the running the small businesses has really given me experience and knowledge in dealing with different problems of different sizes at different times. I think that problem solving's really helped within there. And then, when I worked I worked as a year for a SaaS, a big company up in Edinburgh called Administrate. I was the marketing director there. And that was a big insight into the numbers, all these metrics and the numbers, and how much it takes to actually ensure that at the end of a cycle that you're actually sitting in a good place. And that was pretty mind-blowing, because was just a real education and rigorous data that I hadn't really had before, beyond sort of social media stuff, click-throughs and all that. It was insane. And so I always refer back to things I learned in that role.
There's nothing sexier in marketing than data.
Yeah, and it's vital, but it can also blind you. I think you can get absolute analysis paralysis. And in my team, we've got this kind of mantra at the moment where we're data-led, but we don't ignore intuition. Sometimes you just know if something's going to be right, or you get a good feeling about it. And I think you've got to have the kind of balls, so to speak, for want of a better term, to kind of go for that and give it a go and not be scared to try things out. But yeah, and I'm already, in this role, I've learned so much about how the whiskey, the spirits industry, the trade within it works. Prior to this, I'd had a lot of spirits clients, but I was always on the outside of it, just supplying them with what they needed for a tiny little part of it. But that insight into this industry has made me love it even more, to be honest. And yeah, always learn.
So what does good content marketing look like in 21?
I think based on 2020, an absolute hellish year for a lot of us in many ways. Good content has to be more empathetic, more people-led than ever. It has to be relatable and even less salesy than ever. I think there's always a balance of, we can't just create lots of content and do a great job on social media and not have a tangible output of that, i.e. sales or inquiries or leads or whatever it may be. But I think we now have to be very, very careful at what that blend is and how those sales messages come across. Having said that, the world's going to open up again this year, towards the end of the year, and then certainly into 2022. And people are sitting on money that hasn't been spent on other things and a desire just to fully live their lives again. So I think as marketers, we're all looking at that and going, whoa, we could get a big slice of that. And that's just, real business head on there. But there's opportunities for every business to capitalize on that. But I do think that we just have to be as much about people and relationships as we can. And like I've said, we've seen quite significant success by going behind the scenes of the business.
Yep.
And that will definitely be a key part of our strategy this year. What's
the best bit of content marketing you've seen recently?
I find it really hard to move away from Burger King. Like they're just sort of.
Do you mean physically or?
Yeah, no, there is one up the road that I have been managing to resist it, but yeah, definitely McDonald's, man. But everything that Burger King's done in the last couple of years has just been sensational, and I love their use of technology has been great. There was the whole, when you're in the vicinity of a McDonald's restaurant in the States, you could go to a McDonald's restaurant and order a Whopper, and if you did that, it was just brilliant, and they've just got the tone of everything right. And then actually during the pandemic, they were doing a lot to help out independent takeaways and things like that. So I think they've just nailed it. I'm sure they're working with a great, very expensive agency. But something I really like is their head of marketing is very kind of out there and vocal on Twitter as well. So they're quite approachable from that point of view. I think that's.
I really like the way that they have that kind of guerrilla marketing feel to a lot of the stuff that they do, but it's done from like a corporate brand perspective. Like they walk that line incredibly well, and you can tell that they're doing a good job because they've managed to drag a lot of other brands into that realm with them. So where they've personified their brand and it has its own persona, a lot of other brands have naturally had to come with them. I can't remember who, whatever they did a couple of weeks ago, and it just sparked off all of those different conversations with all of the brands. It was just brilliant. Yeah. So it's good example. Where do you think content doesn't work?
That question's a tricky one. I think that it comes, I think if you are what's the word I'm looking for? If you're a commodity product, if you're something that people just need, then I think it's hard to get excited about how you can create content that's really going to hit the mark there. So like we all buy toothpaste, so I hope so anyway. And I couldn't care less about marketing around toothpaste. It's completely and utterly driven by what's on the supermarket shelf for probably the best price. So I think when you're a commodity product or brand, it can be really hard to get success from content. However, there's an opportunity there, because if you could all of a sudden be a commodity brand that's full of personality and full of kind of that kind of bravery, the sort of stuff that we see from Burger King, albeit in quite a measured way, then I think there's a chance there. But I find it a hard question to answer, because I don't see really where content doesn't work as part of a strategy.
And I totally agree with you. And I think there's some great examples of where you would go, no, like all they need in terms of content is like the meta description on their e-commerce page, and that's all they need. But then if you look at things like, I haven't seen them do one in a while, but like Will It Blend? Like just this dude putting like expensive gadgets in his blender to promote the power of his blender. Who would think of something like that? And like, do you remember the campaign Potpourri, Potpourri, like the Potpourri or whatever it was? Like stuff like that. These are like products that nobody would ever bat an eye to, and they've just created this content model around them. But like, I totally agree with you. It's very rare where I'd say actually content doesn't fit for this. Because I was thinking when you were saying like products that are a commodity and like you need them, I was like, even toilet paper, like the content around that, like the Andrex puppy is probably one of the most recognized like animals on TV, and that kind of stuff, it's all content driven. Anyway, I'm kind of over the top of it. So what excites you most about content marketing and growth right now?
I'm loving it's an interesting one, because having worked in social for so long, I've seen so many platforms like come and go, and everybody gets hyped up about. And that's one thing I'm always saying is don't feel the pressure to jump on something. I am loving this rise of audio that we've seen during the pandemic. I think podcasts have gone insane, almost saturated, which has taken a long time to get to that point in time. But Clubhouse is this one that everyone's talking just now, and I'm starting to think, how can we work with that? So I think audio is something that, if radio's been around forever, but we're seeming it's just becoming, and I've got a kind of small theory around that, is that people are pretty fed up of being seen all the time, or having to be, at least visualized in some way in social. So I think this audio thing is great. I do feel that content marketing in general is definitely getting more data led as well, and I do feel like that's a good place, as long as it doesn't kill creativity and that ability to take a chance. So I'm really watching how that's progressing over the next wee while. And
how are you planning to grow Wemyss in 2021?
Wemyss in 2021 will be very much looking a lot more content, to be honest. We need to ramp up the content creation for the right reasons. And like I've said, we're very much going to be making people a key part of that. But not just our people, actually people who are fans and drinkers of our brands. We want to start bringing them to light as well. We're starting to feature we're so lucky that a lot of people take fantastic photos of our products and put them out there. So we're going to start featuring other people's work a lot more. I think people can get really tired and bored of just a brand voice all the time. Yeah. So we're looking to start adding in a bit more of that.
There's something quite captivating as well, though, when a brand is promoting the use of like UGC, that like it entices you to want to be part of that. I remember like Fever Tree was quite good at doing that, like promoting people who were taking photos of them drinking in different places. And I think that I love UGC because it gives you like some real insight into the world that surrounds the brand, not just the brand's point of view.
Absolutely, and you can learn a lot from it as well, in terms of how are people drinking our drinks, or what part does it play in someone's life. We've got a big campaign coming up that really looks at the part that our products can play in people's lives, because spirits brands and alcohol brands, it's about far more than the actual drinking. There's quite often a lot of significant things in your life that that alcohol can play a part in, and a positive part, I think, is the key word there, key term there. But yeah, I think we're very much driven by people, and it's such a cliche, but when people are interacting with us or when people are watching our content, I want there to be some sort of emotion being generated. And that doesn't mean, they're in tears because we made something really sad. We want them to feel happy, excited, adventurous. And yeah, we might tug at heartstrings from time to time, but that's where we want to go. And you have to show your products in order for people to want them. But we will be creating content this year that is a very underlying thing in. Yeah. Loads of plans for a lot of content that barely touches on the product, but has a place and makes sense in the wider scheme of things.
Last question, which I think is actually a good point to actually just kind of relax and have a little bit of whiskey, which I'm glad you invited me to do that on a Friday afternoon, as you're the only guest that's so far invited me to have a drink. So cheers. The final question is, what's next in growth? Where should people be focusing their efforts?
I do think, we've kind of gone over it, but it has to be just more human. Get more human in everything you do. And there's always an issue. And I think where you can create content until the cows come home, but ultimately people need to see it and interact with it. And there's always going to be good ways of getting your content in front of people, but everybody has to get smarter about that. Some really simple examples of that. If you take the Facebook advertising suite, which obviously covers all their platforms, so many times when I'm going through Instagram stories, I'll see an ad from a brand, and it's often a brand with a lot of budget, and they're not actually making that content custom for the Instagram stories placement, and it just looks awful. And I sometimes think I'm biased towards that as a marketer because I know that's wrong, but it creates a terrible impression. So it's not just creating content for the sake of creating content and then distributing it for the sake of distributing it. It's just about being smarter. And as the world gets busier and noisier and more platforms come on the scene and more advertising options come on the scene, we have to all just be smarter and more refined in what we're doing. And if it works, double down on it. But remember, you're always going to hit a flat line. Everything always hits a flat line, and you have to have the next thing in your locker to push that forward. I have kids screaming in the background now, sorry, but that's it. You might not pick it up.
It's a miracle that one of mine hasn't stood behind the door shouting. So I've managed to, 13 episodes in, I've managed to get away with it so far, but it happens on many a Zoom call. That's it from me, Mike. Thanks for being up for doing the 6 sessions with me. If anybody wants to follow up with you or find out more about Wemyss or even buy a bottle of Wemyss, and I highly recommend people try it, how do you want people to connect with you?
Yeah, actually, do you know what would be great if you got in touch with me personally, and then I could probably make you a recommendation on based on your taste, so your stage of whiskey drinking or indeed gin drinking. But LinkedIn is a fantastic place to connect with me. I'm nice and active there. If you want to see more of a kind of behind the scenes look at my job, it's Wemyss_Mike on Instagram. And if you go to WemyssFamilySpirits.com, that'll give you a portal to all of our spirits. I will just say that site is due a big upgrade, but instead of reeling off 3 different URLs right now, Richard, I think I'll just get people to go to that. But please do connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to find out more about what you're up to.
And any parting wisdom you want to share on a Friday afternoon? And actually, I'm going to ask for some wisdom on that. Which is your favourite Wemyss?
Okay, so the Peat Chimney from Wemyss Malts is a fantastic whiskey. That's what I've got here. It's smoky and peaty in a light way. Anybody that drinks whiskey that has perhaps had a Lefroy or something like that in the past, where it just erupts through your face, the smokiness, which isn't a bad thing depending on your taste, it's not that. It's a really balanced, lovely drink. Kingsbarns Dream to Drams, phenomenal, an absolutely phenomenal Lowlands whiskey with so much depth for something so young. So
that's what I had at Christmas. It was the Dream to Drum.
Oh, was it right? Okay, yeah, and yeah. From what you said, it didn't last long either. So that's obviously
no, it did not. It made it. I think it made it to the end of Boxing Day when my brother came around to join us. So that was about as far as it got.
Right.
So any other parting wisdom other than whiskey recommendations?
I just think that everybody needs to just be really mindful about how they market themselves over the next year or so. Everybody's confused. There's a lot of emotions running, and just bear that in mind. I think that's a big thing.
I think that's a nice way to finish. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Next week we have Neil Stevens, CMO of Fan Finders. So hopefully see everybody next week. Thanks again, Mike.